The Labour government elected in the 1930s is best remembered for the thousands of state rental houses that it built up and down the country, about 30,000 between 1935 when it was elected and 1949 when it was voted out. But they also built quite a few blocks of flats during that period, both medium density and high density. And while the state houses were designed, some of them were designed through the Institute of Architects, some of them were designed by through Fletcher Construction Company, but it was really with blocks of flats like this that the Housing Division architects had their opportunity to pursue their interest in modern architecture and to show their interest and awareness of developments that had taken place within particularly European architecture in the 1920s. And there were quite a few architects who were emigres from Europe, from Hitler, who were working in the Housing Division, and a number of them worked on buildings like this. So there's some debate among architectural historians about the extent to which those emigres should be recognised as the designers of these buildings. But looking at the drawings, I haven't really seen any evidence to attribute this particular one to anybody other than Gordon Wilson, who was the chief architect of the Housing Division in the 1940s when it was designed and built. Originally, the plan for this particular site was that blocks like this would run down both sides of Grays Avenue. They had a plan for nearly 500 flats covering both sides of the street. What we see today only has about 50 or so flats. It's still much bigger than it looks. If we go around the back of the building, you can see that it has two wings projecting out at right angles to the street. So it is quite a lot bigger than what we see from the street. So there's an interesting parallel between the Grays Avenue flats and the Myers Park scheme that we looked at earlier, in that both of them were what they called urban renewal programs. So they wanted to clear away what was there and come in and build afresh. And the Grays Avenue block was often described as an early initiative in slum clearance, even though it was preceded by the clearance of the Grey Street Gully kind of 20 or 30 years earlier. Both of them were also informed about an enthusiasm for fresh air and sunshine. Fresh air and sunshine were going to be the cure for urban ills, and so that sort of runs through the discourse on modern architecture, where we see higher-rise buildings in park-like settings so that each of the buildings had access to fresh air and sunlight rather than being congested and close to its neighbours, where fresh air couldn't circulate and lots of shadows were created. In the early days of the Labour government state housing program, they were very conscious of trying to use a mixture of designs within the various housing schemes. Some of them accommodated like 300 or 400 houses, so quite big developments, but within those there was an effort to try and make houses look different from their neighbours so that the area would not be recognisably a state housing area. And part of, or related to that, they also made a conscious effort to use a range of different building materials. So in the wake of the Depression, that was about stimulating various different trades within the building industry and getting as many people working again as possible. So the move to start using concrete was part of that, although it was complicated during World War II because the load-bearing concrete structures required steel for the reinforcing, and all the steel was diverted into the war effort. And so even though this building was designed in 1941, construction didn't start until the war ended in 1945 because of that shortage in steel. And that also partially explains why they just built a small portion of what was to have been a vast scheme running right up Grays Ave in the 40s, was that ongoing shortage of steel